Can you hear me? I assume you can. Just want to say welcome. Thank you for joining us for this event. I'm Gauthier. I'm going to be your moderator. I am a senior human rights officer at Geneva International Center for Justice, and I'm also here as a representative of the International Organization for the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. I'm just really excited to have you all and to also have our two incredible speakers. Before we get started into the topic of the session, which is human rights violations against women and children in the context of Palestine under the occupation, we have a few items just to address right off the bat about how the session will unfold. So first of all, interpretation is available. You can tune into channel 1 for English or just listen, and then channel 7 is in Arabic for those who would prefer that. Secondly, per regulations of the Human Rights Councils, photos are not permitted. We do have people designated to take pictures of the event, so if you would like to receive those, just feel free to come to us at the end of the session, and we'll give you access to that if you just drop your contact info with us. And lastly, we'll have a period for questions at the very end of the session, so please save those and any other comments until then. Now, just to introduce the topic of the discussion today, you all here are likely aware of the devastating situation in Gaza at the moment, inflicted upon the Palestinian people by the Israeli occupation. In Gaza, women and children take the brunt of the occupation's terrible assault, representing roughly 70% of the over 32,000 casualties since October 7th. Israel repeatedly fails to uphold its commitments to international humanitarian law, as evidenced by its deliberate targeting and extrajudicial killing of Palestinian women, many of whom are pregnant or caring for newborn children. It also routinely denies Palestinians access to humanitarian resources, leading to hundreds of thousands suffering from severe malnutrition and dehydration. We also have reports of hundreds of Palestinian women who have suffered from sexual abuse and exploitation at the hands of the occupation forces, another tragic way in which they have been disproportionately affected by the ongoing assault. Israel has failed to uphold its commitments to prevent genocide and is actively imposing brutal collective punishment on the Palestinian people. Tragically, it appears women will disproportionately bear the burden of rebuilding the fabric of Gazan society in the years to come, a task that they will have to undertake while also caring for the more than 1 million children deeply traumatized by the devastating assault on their homeland. We're very fortunate to have two incredible speakers with us to discuss this topic. Joining us is Francesca Albanese, Special Rapporteur on the human rights situation in the Palestinian territories occupied since 1967. Ms. Albanese is a renowned scholar in the fields of international law and forced displacement, an expert on the legal and humanitarian situation in Palestine. She's also worked for a decade as a human rights expert for the United Nations, including at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and at the Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees. Presenting alongside Ms. Albanese is Rula Shadeed, a Palestinian human rights defender coming to us from Palestine with over 15 years of experience in the field of human rights, refugee law, mobilization, and advocacy, and she currently serves as the co-director of the Palestinian Institute for Public Diplomacy. She's going to be providing a first-hand account of the situation on the ground in the OPT, with particular focus on the occupation's genocidal violence towards women and children. Without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Ms. Rula Shadeed.
Okay. Do you hear me well? Thank you very much for organizing today's session. It's a very important topic indeed. I would like to actually start with taking a minute of silence on the lives of 14,280, I repeat, 14,880 children, kids that have been killed in this genocide, and 9,340 women that has been also killed in this genocide. Let us take 1 minute to remember the lives of each one of those. Each life of those people mattered, the whole world for another. We do not want to enter into a normalization situation when we speak about our people. This is very dangerous, and this is also part of the dehumanization that is being practiced against our people. So I would like to first share a story with you, and then I'm going to give you some horrific statistics about our people, and then I would like to go into the context and why is this a very strategic genocidal act being practiced by the colonizing state of Israel. I usually don't spend much time on social media because of the tons of other things that are very, very acute and we have to address. But one of the videos that I watched and actually didn't make me sleep for many days, a little girl speaking to her cat and saying, I really, really hope that we both, if we die, we die together. The girl is about, I would say, 6 years old, 7 years old. And then she told the cat, but if I die before you, please do not eat me. Eat somebody we don't know. This is one of millions of stories that are currently happening in Gaza. And if you also just take 1 second to think about the 25,000 children and women who have hundreds of such stories, you can maybe start thinking of the amount of this catastrophe, the amount of this genocide, and the volume of inhumanity that we have reached. This is not a catastrophe for Palestine and Palestinians. This is a catastrophe for the world. And if you don't know that, I do invite you to think a little bit about the fact that this is happening live. We are watching this child speaking to her cat, and we are looking. Some people might cry, some people might take action, boycott, but it's not enough because whatever we're doing is not even ending the continuation of the bombing of people. And it's very important to know, okay, so the horrific statistics that I have just mentioned, of course, unfortunately, until yesterday, and remember that we have over 7,000 lost under rubble that we don't know much about, 32,922 people. 32,000. That is equivalent to some cities here in Switzerland. Entire city being totally killed, the population of it entirely demolished. So also another extreme situation is the situation of famine. And as you probably know, if you have followed other situations around the world in crises, children are the most people that suffer from starvation so far. I don't know how many of you are parents, but just imagine, and bear with me, I know these are difficult moments, but this is the reality. For you who are parents, imagine looking at your child aching from starvation and dying in front of your eyes, and you as a mother, you as a father, you as a relative for this child cannot provide any type of support and help to save your own child. Just imagine that to your close family and think of the situation of the million women that are living in Gaza and seeing those children, their own relatives, facing such atrocities. So why is this happening? Why is it against women and children? This is not a situation that is not intentional. Social death is the first step to a group's physical annihilation. And this is what we have been seeing. So what has the colonizer done so far? is to dehumanize Palestinians. This is not a situation that started on the 7th of October. You have heard this over and over and over again. This is a situation of colonization. And it's about time to think about the situation of Palestine as a colonization project, a settler colonial project that is very clear and has a very concise intent and project into what it should do so that its project is actually successful, so that its project will be continuous, so that their aim and end goal actually becomes a reality. And this is the situation of Palestine. It is not a mere occupation. It is not a mere apartheid. It is not a mere confiscation of land, killings, imprisonment, starvation, and so on. It all falls under one project that uses many tools to colonize and continue the colonization of Palestine. So when we think why exactly women and children, think about what is a woman, you know? She is a mother, a sister, a wife, a student, a professional, and she is the carrier of a family. She is where a family starts. So no wonder in any colonization situation, women and children are being attacked because of their reproductional and the mothering of Palestinian children. They are the ones that carry the continuation and steadfastness of the resistance that Palestinian people are carrying on. And this is a fact that our colonizer is very much aware of. The women of Palestine have not been suffering from the 7th of October. We are hearing horrific stories, and some of them are mentioned in the report of Ms. Albanese on the situation of women and children in specific, in prisons, in hospitals. There are women that are giving birth without anesthesia. There are women that are lacking any type of food for their children. And we are hearing of amputations of children without any anesthesia. And by the way, this is also a piece of information that I recently learned by interviewing one of the doctors who have been working in Gaza, that actually pain can lead to death. Pain can turn into a physiological sense that can lead to a heart attack. So these are different methodologies and ways of how to continue the entire project of the Israeli colonizer to affect and kill the spirit and the core of a Palestinian family. And then we have also heard the testimonies of the horrific stories of sexual violence and rape happening in Gaza and in the West Bank. Over 80 women have been imprisoned, are now currently in different Israeli military prisons that are not in the West Bank, but in the within the Green Line, and they have been almost every one of them that we managed to get testimonies from have been sexually harassed, have been threatened with rape, and have been humiliated, strip searched, regardless of their age. These are actions that are today not being very much looked on because of what we are saying, the horrifics that are the horrific situation that is happening actually in Gaza. But we cannot think about the situation of Palestine as a situation of a humanitarian situation only that is happening in Gaza. This is a continuation, and we really need to step up and think, where is the role of also one of the main things that has been very, I would say, worrying is the Western feminist movements. In 2016, we have seen all these women get out in the streets of the United States for the objection of the elections of Trump. They were thinking that this is a misogynist situation where this is not a life that they would like to live. We don't see these women today. But Palestine is also a feminist cause. And it is also a cause that we should see solidarity among. So we are left alone. And it is very interesting to see how Palestine has become a test for many movements, parties, individuals, states, on where do you actually stand and what is it you actually are willing to do and sacrifice in order to create a much better world. Thank you.
Thank you for those powerful words, Ms. Shadeed. I think it's really important to have the perspective of Palestinian women in conversations like these, and we're really grateful to have had you here to present on this. Now I'd like to give the floor to Ms. Albanese to present her own statements.
Yeah. Going to present a statement, but I'm going to share some thoughts also based on this very difficult months and difficult days. I'm sure you are all familiar with the report I just presented to member states. And as I said, and it was not rhetoric, it took really a lot of energy, and it was with a heavy heart that I presented that report, but also, in a way, what we are seeing happening to the Palestinian people today, it's, as I wrote in the report, a tragedy foretold. We have not been able to read the signs on the wall. It was there all along, because this is what settler colonialism is about, ultimately. Settler colonialism, and this is something I also learned through the understanding the genesis of the Genocide Convention. Settler colonialism is genocidal in itself, and this was understood by those who proposed the drafting of the Genocide Convention. Then the reason why settler colonialism was not criminalized per se, I think it's quite easy to understand. No one of the powerful states, being the majority in the international community back then, wanted to self-incriminate. But I want to read something that I wrote in my in my previous report, the one on children that I presented to the General Assembly last year, because it's true that special rapporteurs have sounded the alarm over and over. But there is one thing that struck me as I was working with children in preparation of this report, which was eventually dedicated to a phenomenon that a Palestinian scholar has called unchilding. This is what is life for a Palestinian child under occupation, and this is also what was life for them, who are half of the Palestinian population. Half of the Palestinian population is made of children. And the conditions of the living conditions that Israeli occupation has created take away the lightness and the innocence of the childhood means. I mean, I just saw a video yesterday, and they were comparing desires and expectations of kids, and so a bunch of kids, most probably, from various countries, were asked, what would you like? And they were saying, an iPhone, a new car, or money, food or chocolate, endless chocolate. And then there were the kids in Gaza. What would you like? Kids in Gaza these days say, I would like to have my father back. I would like to have my siblings back. I would like to know that I will not die. But this is something that it was already there, because in my interviews with the children last summer, it was shocking to hear so many when asked after a few hours of engagement, because it's also difficult for me not being able to be there physically, so we had these conversations online, and after a while I was asked, what's your fear? What you don't really like? And And when I asked, what's your fear? It was almost the same across the entire occupied Palestinian territory, northern Gaza, southern Gaza, central Gaza, Nablus, Geneva. They were scared to die or to have their parents dying. So they grow up with this internalizing this existential threat that is upon them. And it's paralyzing because you cannot really have a horizon or really dream apart from the challenges of daily life. But however, I wrote, after listing all the crimes that I identified being committed against children, I said the likelihood of these offenses being cumulatively committed as part of a policy of de-Palestinianization of the occupied territory and of a plan to incrementally annex it must be urgently investigated. Such a plan would threaten the right of an entire people to exist as a national group, challenging the very foundation of the international legal order. So sorry, this was my second report. The third report gets to the same concept, meaning undermining fundamental rights of children is a way to tackle, to target an entire population and cut it from the very roots. This was already there, and this is why, shocking as is, I was not surprised that one day, to be dealing with what is considered the crime of crimes, which is genocide. But let me remind you, and then happy to take questions. Genocide is not a crime of crimes because it's on top of a hierarchy. It's true there is a higher threshold to prove the responsibility and the intent, but it's a different crime compared to crime against humanity and war crimes. War crimes is violations of rules of law. Crimes against humanity are widespread and systematic attack against the civilian population, against the population, against the group. And so there is a targeting of group per se, which means that the crimes against humanity can happen including in non-armed in non-hostility conflicts, in non-hostilities, in situations other than conflicts. But what characterizes genocide is the intent to destroy a people in whole, a group in whole or in part. And this can be said, and it's been said, can be understood from the conduct on the ground, and it has been said and done. The acts that have been committed reverberated, echoed what had been said by Israeli and political leaders. But also, you need to look at the patterns of conduct, the scale and nature of the crimes committed. I hear fellow lawyers saying, yeah, it was war crimes. You need to look at the overall system of violations. This toxic combination of war crimes has a meaning. And we need to be able to discern the genocidal intent, because what I mean, for example, the moment Israel has imposed a siege, a total siege, because there was already a siege, which was already a war crime, already a collective punishment, tightening the siege, the moment the population was being bombed north to south, with an arsenal of weapons that would not be accepted, cannot be accepted, against the highest, one of the highest populated areas on earth. Israel knew that it was sentencing people to death, not just by bombs, but something that is more silent but not less pernicious than bombs, as a colleague of mine has said, which is starvation, which is the impossibility to cure even basic conditions. And this is the reality in Gaza. So I really hope that you look into this seriously, because genocide should have been prevented, and it has not. It has already been committed. Now, the difference, between how long will it take to people to act upon this and then action taken will determine the number of further victims of this genocidal violence. Voilà.
Thank you, Ms. Albanese, for those words. And I just want to say we really appreciate the work that you've done over the past years to discuss this issue and bring it to the attention of the international community. We have some time for some questions from the audience. Just a couple little things before we get into that. We're going to restrict it to one question per person because I'm sure there's a lot of interest in sharing comments, and please keep your comments respectful and brief. Thank you. So any hands? Yes, sir, in front.
Alfred Desires, former independent expert on international order, former secretary of the Human Rights Committee, representative of the Geneva International Peace Research Institute, and of the Europa Collective for Gaza. I think I forwarded you the manifesto that we just issued that's being published tomorrow in Counterpunch. We also have 2 open letters to European leaders reminding them of their responsibility to protect and of their responsibility to prevent genocide. Question both to Ms. Shadeed and to Ms. Albanese. Now, the diagnosis being clear, and you have more than justified it, more than substantiated it. But what measures can the international community take? We, in the Geneva International Peace Research Institute, have proposed breaking all trade and diplomatic relations with Israel. This is serious. This is not business as usual. This is genocide. This is ongoing genocide in the face of the world. This is a crisis of civilization. Now, there are many possibilities in the international judicial system. There are already cases before the International Criminal Court, and Ireland just decided to join. I'm very happy about that, join South Africa. And of course, there are the cases in the International Criminal Court, but people seem to forget that the Human Rights Committee, whose secretary I used to be, also has an interstate complaints procedure under Article 41. Now, the United States did not introduce a reservation to Article 41, and you cannot do it retroactively. So any country, state party to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, can submit a complaint to the Human Rights Committee alleging violations by the United States, by United Kingdom, by France, by Germany, by many countries of the European Union that have delivered weapons to Israel, weapons that are being used for the genocide. They can invoke violations of Articles 6 and 7 and 9 and 10 and 14 and 26, etc. This is, of course, not as weighty as the International Criminal Court or the International Court of Justice. But, I mean, action must be taken. I am dismayed at 6 months of genocide going on and the international community whitewashing it and the international community not taking concrete action. Thank you.
Okay, so there's a lot that can be done, as you rightly mentioned. So definitely military embargo is something that is extremely important. The immediate, of course, pressure on the immediate ceasefire is the most important situation today, and we look at those in priority, right? So first we need an immediate ceasefire, and then we need an immediate entry of humanitarian aid and food and water and electricity, etc. We also need to pressure Israel to release all political prisoners and the arbitrary detention. That is about 10,000 people who have been detained after the 7th of October only. reset the foreign policy and political processes to be centered on fulfilling people's rights, including, of course, the right to self-determination and right of return, to recognize the root causes of why this is happening. So this is a change of narrative that will lead us to a different toolbox, right? Because when it is a situation of colonization, we have a different toolbox that we can look into and see what can we do, what are the main steps that we should be taking. Also, stop any aid and assistance that maintains the illegal apartheid and occupation, including the cancellation, as you said, of the free trade agreements. Support South Africa's case against Israel for genocide at the ICJ, and support with resources and others to the International Criminal Court on the ongoing, also open investigation that has not been accelerated as it should. And of course, activate universal jurisdiction mechanisms within your own countries to hold to account perpetrators of war crimes, crimes against humanity, but also the crime of genocide. Demand the UN to investigate Israel apartheid by supporting the recognition of the UN Special Committee Against Apartheid. And lastly, ensure that corporate entities and institutions domestically in your own territories and under your own jurisdiction desist from the aiding and abetting of Israeli crimes against the Palestinian people. So I would say and the list goes on. There's a lot that can be done. Lastly, actually, I just also remembered call for the deactivation of Israel's memberships in sport clubs, in Eurovision, in what is happening, FIFA, and the Olympics that are happening very soon in France. There should be a pressure to show that a country that is committing genocide is not a country that is welcomed among other people, just as normal and business goes as usual.
You leave me with nothing to say, but if I can comment on, actually add on, because there are a number of problems that have arisen in the time of genocide. We have seen the active, sometimes persecution of civil society. There has been, I agree with you that Palestine has become a test also outside of Palestine, because freedom of expression, the right to protest, the freedom of assembly has been questioned and has been shrunk. It's a fact that in a number of European countries, solidarity was not admitted, was prohibited. And it was also, the thing is not just this prohibition, it's the slandering, the assimilating Palestinians, and anyone who stands in solidarity with the Palestinians, which doesn't mean stands against the Israelis, but these are the Palestinians without rights between the river and the sea. And this is, there has been more than that, the real smearing, accusing them of being pro-Hamas or pro-terrorism, and this is something that requires action. So in each country there is a need to protect these people and to push back on this smear. The other thing is that in this critical moment, a number of European countries have suspended funding to Palestinian civil society, who do a critical job. They have been those who are targeted as terrorists by Israeli legislation. They are the ones who are collecting evidence for the ICC. So we should all be grateful to them, and the ICC first and foremost. So the reason why that funds are being suspended is not entirely clear to me, but it's wrong. And so everything should be done. I hope you can heed this call, because we need to be more than just the special rapporteur on the organizations themselves to call for these funds to be reinstated. And the last thing, other two things. When we think of using national domestic courts, I'm really supportive. I think that the delay that has been registered at the ICC level shouldn't distract us from the fact that the ICC is important, but this is not the only one. And national domestic courts are excellent venues to initiate proceedings. And there are so many double nationals, Israelis with double nationality that have partaken in the action of the army. So there is the need to investigate possible crimes. Last is the Commission of Inquiry. The Commission of Inquiry on Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory has been under a lot of pressure and attack, including by member states in this council. And I say, look, I respect that you might have disagreement, but once the resolution is passed, it's passed. It's so disrespectful to keep on challenging the mandate of the Commission of Inquiry, especially when now we have seen how the positive impact it can make, because the ICJ advisory opinion on the legality of the occupation was ultimately triggered. It's built on work done by others, but it was ultimately triggered by the COI. So I hope you will extend your support to them as we move forward.
Thank you, and thank you for your question, sir. I believe there's a bit more time for some questions. I see that there's one over here. Oh, yes, back there, yeah.
Thank you. As a Palestinian, I salute you both for the excellent work you're doing. As a Swiss citizen, I'm very worried about how the Swiss government is dealing business as usual with this case. One of the governments that has actually cut funding of Palestinian NGOs is the Swiss government, disappointingly. We know the past, we know the present. What about the future? How do you both envision a just solution for Palestine? 10 years from now, if we're looking at the situation, if we're looking back, what is the most utopic, realistic, just solution for Palestine? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. How much time do we have? What is the solution? Okay, I just want to give a comment on it's interesting to see how this continent, where is it heading? This is why in my intervention I did mention that this is something that is against humanity. It does test every individual's principles, humanity, and so on. But what was really, really interesting to see here is that what is happening in Palestine suddenly has had its immediate effect on Europeans' liberties. So have you thought about that? You are suddenly in certain states banned of demonstrating, banned of saying certain sentences, and also banned from using certain colors. Do you really think that the situation between your neighboring continent, which is the Middle East, and Europe will remain the same when we see that everything that you have been preaching for has been nonsense? And I'm not going to be apologetic. This is our reality. Your own liberties as Germans, as Swiss, as French, as so on, are being under threat and under attack. So forget about Palestine and think about what is happening to you. So that is one thing that is very important. And again, it's very important to see how that is happening in relation to a crisis that is happening not in Europe, right? But this also shows the intersectionality between the colonizing state and the states of Europe, okay? So this is one. In relation to how do I see this, what will happen next? So this is why we are focusing so much on the context, and this is why we're focusing so much on the narrative. When we acknowledge, first we really need to acknowledge that this is a colonization. This is not a historical film, right? This is our current situation. This is not a documentary. This is what we are living. This is what we saw happening in Syria, in Congo, in many different other places that were colonized, right? This is happening today with Palestinians. So the first thing that we thought must happen in Syria, for example, in Lebanon, in Algeria, in Congo, etc., was the ending of colonization. It is not to build institutions. You cannot build institutions while you are facing a colonization. The colonizer will keep on destroying your institutions. And that is not my own imagination. It is something that we have actually seen. So since the Oslo Agreement and the peace agreement, the institutions that the Palestinian Authority was trying to build and actually fooling its entire people and itself and the international community just merely vanished. In the 90s, there was a building, we built an airport in Gaza. It was bombed after almost 1 month. So that is an illusion. Okay, so the first thing is, again, acknowledging that it is a colonization. The only way to end on a colonization, the only way to deal with a colonization is ending it with every single mean of resistance. Palestinians have the right to liberate themselves from occupation, from colonization, from apartheid. We have the right to live a very free and normal life where we have the right to self-determination, we have the right to return, and we have the right to live a normal life, and our children, not saying that their own mere thing that they fear is death. So this is the second step. The third step, once colonization is ending and once we are liberated from this colonizer and self-determination is actually in place, this is where the institution building starts. And this is where a state building starts. Now, I don't know what the Palestinian people would like to have. A 1-state, a 2-state, a 17-state, I don't care. What I care about is that there will be self-determination. There will be a process of elections and democracy and healthy political life, because we have been prevented from having a political life for the past 75 years, and even before. During the English Empire, we also were denied our right to having any assembly, any parties. So we, in the past 100 years, have not had the chance to be in a healthy political life where we can actually affect our own future and our own rights, our own establishment and the building of our identity, whether political, cultural, economical, etc. So this is the third step. And the final one is to be happy. Thanks.
Maybe if I can just add one thing. I know that for many in this room, or for many in this part of the world, this language, right to resist, is anathema. It's, oh my God, what is it? I mean, it's true, the right to resist exists in international law, within the limits of the law, of course. And I've said it many times, I mean, targeting civilians is not a legitimate objective, but an unlawful act of the resistance does not invalidate the right to resist, which is still there. And I would say that the Palestinians have resisted peacefully for decades. But if we take away, or if we make peaceful resistance useless and ineffective, if we crush it every opportunity, then we'd leave no other choice to these people to recur to less peaceful means. And this doesn't mean to justify the commission of crimes. It's just to say you cannot expect these people to accept to live under oppression forever, in perpetuity. It's unacceptable. And again, I think it's important to remind everyone that the two-state solution was an attempt. The Palestinians accepted the compromise. The Palestinians accepted the segregation of their people that the two-state solution would still imply, because they do feel it. I mean, they talk of unity of the people, unity of the land, unity of the struggle, which doesn't mean sending anyone to the sea but is it that much to ask that the Israelis don't live in their land with privilege and with suprematism? Because this is what it's been asked. And the responsibility of the international community is not to decide, to replace the Palestinians in deciding what form of states. We are beyond that, frankly. The emergency is to make sure that the rights of everyone in the land are respected. And this is where there seems to be some dissonance among policymakers.
I've been informed that we have a Palestinian woman just coming from Gaza who wants to share her experience. So Ms. Heba, if you'd like to take the floor.
مرحبا. أود أن أشكركم على هذه الفرصة وأشكر دكتور رؤوف السلطي. أنا هبة نبيل أبو معالي، عمري 28 سنة، متزوجة، لدي طفلة اسمها زينة. في ثالث يوم في الحرب، حرب غزة 2023، بتاريخ 9/10/2023، كان مفروض هذا التاريخ يكون ذكرى كتير حلوة لإلنا، ذكرى ميلاد زوجي، بس للأسف الاحتلال كانوا له كلمة تانية. في هذا اليوم في 9/10 في ثالث يوم الحرب تم قصفنا. احنا ساكنين في حي كتير معروف، حي كتير قديم، ملهوش اي معالم عسكرية، بس للأسف في لمحة بصر تم قصفنا. كنا 11 شخص في البيت في المنزل، تم استشهاد منا 4 وإصابة 7. ال4 والدة زوجي ومرت أخيه وطفليه أطفالها، ظافر 6 سنين، لارا 3 سنين، وتم إصابتي أنا وزوجي وإخوته ووالده. بس في أثناء القصف وأنا تحت الردم والركام، طفلتي عمرها كان 13 شهر، كنا محتفلين فيها جديد بميلادها السنة. كانت طفلتي أنا بين حجار مش شايفاها، كانت بتعيط بتصرخ تحكي ماما ماما ماما. أنا مش قادرة أوصل لها، حاولت بس وقع الحجر علي الردم. ضلت تحكي ماما 10 دقايق، ضلنا تحت الردم نص ساعة 30 دقيقة. أنا مش قادرة أشوفها ولا قادرة ألمسها ولا قادرة أحضنها ولا أحميها. بعد 10 دقايق اختفت زينة، بطلت تحكي أي كلمة. فضلتني 20 دقيقة وأنا أتمنى أشوفها، أنا مش عارفة وين هي. بعدها إجا الإسعاف بعد 30 دقيقة، إجا الإسعاف وأنقذني أول واحدة. أنا قلت له ما بدي أطلع، طلع لي بنتي، بدي بنتي أول إشي بعدين أنا أطلع. لو حكى لي لا اطلعي أنت عشان نقدر نوصل لبنتك. وصلت طلعوني في الإسعاف، وصلت المستشفى بسأل عن بنتي مش موجودة، بعرفوش عنها إشي. طب وين بنتي؟ صار يحكوا لي في العمليات. مرت 5 ساعات وأنا مش عارفة إشي عن بنتي. بالآخر الحمد لله بنتي طلعت عايشة، بس إصابتها كانت إصابة بليغة في إيدها اليسار، خلع في الكتف وتهتك في المرفق. فالحمد لله إنها عايشة، الحمد لله اطمنت عليها. بس كان الوضع كتير سيء، ضلينا إحنا في المستشفى الشفاء. لما اشتحوه في أول مرة، اشتحوا المستشفى وإحنا إحنا كنا مصابين. كان زوجي وقتها طالع جديد على مصر يعالجوه في الدفعة الثانية. بعدها ضلينا إحنا في المستشفى. لما الاحتلال صار إنه حوالين المستشفى صار يضرب قذائف. كانت أمي متواجدة معايا. مرة راحت تشتري إن تدور على مية عشان إنه أعمل حليب لبنتي زينة، فجأة ضربوا البوابة، وأمي كانت لسه في أثناء اللحظة هاي دخل البوابة. أنا ما بقدر أمشي، كان عندي إصابة بكسر في الفقرات الصدرية وما بقدر أمشي بتاتا، وكانت بنتي بتعيط وأنا مش قادرة أوصل لها أحملها. أنا حتى الآن ما بقدر أحمل بنتي.
Daughter or to go to her. My mother came to tell me that she was still alive. 1 week later, the occupation raided the hospital. We had to move to the south. I was walking and I had an injury in my spine. I had to work for kilometers and kilometers. It was torture. I stayed. I started walking on corpses. Around me, all around me, there were tanks, and the soldiers were laughing at us. Why did we have to suffer so? There was no basic necessity in the hospital, and when there was a resolution for all the people of the north part of Gaza to head to the south of the Gaza Strip, the first people who left were the UNRWA, the NGOs. Nobody supported us or provided us with any assistance. I was looking for water for my daughter. I was looking for milk, anything that I could find for my daughter. And during the last 8 days, I was drinking dark liquid. I was keeping the good water for my daughter, the basic necessities for my daughter, but I was trying to fill my hunger at the same time. The situation was really harsh and difficult. I'd like to ask, why aren't the international laws being implemented against Israel? For 6 months, we have lost everything. I have lost my home. I have lost my family, the family of my husband. If we can't go back to Gaza, where do we go? My husband lost his job. We've lost our lives. What are we going to do in the upcoming years? We won't be able to celebrate the birthdays of our children because they will coincide with the deaths of so many members of our families. The number of displaced persons. And here I'd like to say, what was the role of the United Nations? What was the role of human rights organizations? Where were you? The number of injured people was so many, the people of displaced, the martyrs, so many people. When they invaded the hospital, a bomb fell into the rooms, and I could hear people saying, "I lost my leg, I lost my arm." My daughter just has nightmares. She's calling out for her father. Thank God her father has received treatment, but they have disseminated the whole family members. We're trying to provide help and assistance, but we have nothing to provide, nothing to share. There are no hospitals in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. They have disseminated us. What's left? Really, what's your role? Thank you.
So, just for everybody's reference, I think we need to end the session here, but I just want to thank you for your courage in being here and for sharing your experience. These are the stories that we need to hear as the international community, so thank you. And also, thank you to our two speakers for being here. Ms. Heba's story will also be covered in the session in this room after this. So if you'd like to keep hearing about this discussion, which is very important, please feel free to stay. But thank you all. They're telling us to head on. So thank you for being here. We really appreciate it.